It's July the 7th and the anniversary of two mass shootings that were not. How the government and the press deliberately mislabel tragedy today on the 10th Man. Today on the 10th Man, we're talking about two attacks with the same date. July 7th, 2005, 20 years ago, bombs ripped through the London Underground, the subway, with 52 killed, over 700 injured. And July 7th, 2024, gunfire erupts at a so-called block party in Detroit. 2 dead, 19 injured. But only one of these events gets labeled a mass shooting, and it's not the one that leveled a bus. So let's dissect how headlines lie and how fake statistics mislead, looking at two events, both tragic, but only one has been weaponized by the media to justify disarming you. Every time there's a shooting in the U.S., Democrats, the UN, European elites, and the media line up to lecture Americans about their gun rights. But here's the irony. The greatest danger to the average citizen in the West hasn't been rogue rifle owners, it's been radical Islamic terror. And the most devastating mass attacks, they weren't shootings. We're told that Detroit's 2 a.m. gang chaos is a mass shooting, one that demands international concern. But when coordinated bombers murder commuters in London, that doesn't count because they're not actually trying to stop violence. They're trying to stop you from having your rights. July 7, 2005, morning rush hour in London. 4 British-born jihadists carry homemade bombs in backpacks. They've got hydrogen peroxide, pepper, a timer, and hate. All the ingredients for mass murder. They board 3 underground trains and 1 red double-decker bus. At 8:45 a.m., the explosions begin. First at Aldersgate. 7 dead, 170 injured. Just seconds later, Edgware Road. 6 dead, 160 injured. At 8:50, Russell Square. 26 dead, 340 injured. And at 9:47 at Tavistock Square Bus, 13 dead, 100 injured. 52 people were killed. Over 700 people were injured. Most of them victims who were just trying to go to work. The attackers used everyday materials to create their weapons. There were no semi-automatics, no high-capacity magazines, no ghost guns, and no American gun culture to blame. And yet the attack has been forgotten. After a mass shooting at a school in Graz, Austria in June 2025, the Washington Post ran a widely shared chart on global mass shootings to show how dangerous all the guns in America are. Of course, only 2 mass shootings were listed for the UK on this chart, of all the mass shootings since the year 2000, and it wasn't 7/7, because the 7/7 attacks weren't a shooting, and shootings are all that count to fake news outlets like the Washington Post. And since it wasn't a gun, Britain didn't respond by attacking the tools. They didn't go after beauty supplies and chemical fertilizers. They responded with more intelligence sharing, more resources from MI5, and training the public to report danger. They went after the terrorist networks, not the tools they use, and not citizens. Which raises the real question, why don't our politicians and media all over the world treat terrorism as a greater threat? Because now, jump forward 19 years, same date, July 7th, 2024. Detroit, Michigan. A so-called block party, but this wasn't families grilling burgers on the sidewalk. It wasn't couples strolling through the neighborhood, meeting new friends and greeting old ones. It was a Snapchat flash mob. 300 strangers swarmed a residential neighborhood, and it was the middle of the afternoon? No, it was the middle of the night. No one from the block hosted it. On the contrary, streets were blocked, and locals were trapped in their homes at 2:25 a.m. And remember, 2:25 p.m. would be a good time for a block party, but this was a.m., and gunfire suddenly erupted. There were multiple shooters, at least one illegal Glock switch, a homemade one, and more than 100 rounds were fired. Nearly a dozen handguns were recovered. 2 people died and 19 more were wounded. They tell us that armed citizens should be disarmed and that we should rely on the police. But in Detroit a year ago, just a month prior, when the police came, they started shooting and 2 people were hit. One of them died at another so-called block party. And this became the headline event of the day. It entered the gun violence archive as a mass shooting. The Detroit police actually handled the aftermath well, arresting shooters and cracking down on future gatherings. There wasn't any knee-jerk gun control. They left that to the state legislature. Detroit treated the actual behavior. But the media didn't tell that story. They called it Michigan's biggest mass shooting ever, and they invoked Parkland and Uvalde and Columbine. Except that this wasn't a school or some other public gathering place. It wasn't daytime. It wasn't random, and it wasn't even a block party. And still, it was used to indict the Second Amendment. What do you think of when they say there's been a mass murder? And which one of these 2 events fits? The London bombing targeted people on their way to work. The Detroit shooting involves people breaking the law at 2 a.m. London, a terrorist cell with commuters as victims. Detroit, a flash mob. Bystanders, victims, and shooters were all active participants in the chaos. But only one gets labeled a mass shooting, only one is used to push policy, only one makes it into political speeches because only one fits the agenda. Gun rights have to be attacked, so violence must be redefined. Tragedies are ranked not by severity, but by usefulness. So the 2 a.m. block party, and only the 2 a.m. block party, and double murder, earns the title of mass shooting according to the media. Even in America, our biggest danger is not shootings, but bombings. The Oklahoma City attack in 1995 on the Murrah Federal Building was a bombing. Our biggest school attack, Bath, Michigan in 1927, was a bombing. 9/11 involved 4 giant flying bombs, and remember, even the Columbine shooting was not a lone shooter, but 2 conspirators in what was meant to be a bombing. And since 1979, 66,000 Islamic terror attacks globally. Most were bombings. Some were stabbings, a few used cars and trucks. And without the Second Amendment to protect them, what were Europe's worst mass killings? They were not AR-15s. Nice, France, 2016. 86 people killed by a truck. Manchester Arena in the UK, 2017. 22 people killed and over 1,000 injured by a bomb at a concert. Paris, 2015. 130 killed by bombs and machine guns. Terrorists sprayed gunfire on people who could not shoot back. So tell us what good it does to ban AR-15s and high-capacity magazines in civilian hands. And why don't these incidents make the Washington Post chart? Because they're not gun violence, and gun violence is the narrative. The July 17, 2024 block party mass shooting was the star entry in the database of the Gun Violence Archive for that day. The Gun Violence Archive is the favorite source of the anti-gun media because they'll count any incident with 4 people shot, even if they're only scratched. And it doesn't matter who, it doesn't matter why, it doesn't matter where. The U.S. does not have a gun problem, it has an urban crime problem. But the government and the mainstream media are not interested in attacking crime because it's easier to attack guns. So the Gun Violence Archive numbers get plastered across the headlines, reported by CNN, and cited by members of government. And worse, they're used by foreign media and global institutions to argue that America is uniquely violent and irresponsible, when it's actually the safest place on earth. Meanwhile, a coordinated bombing of public transport with 52 dead, not a mass shooting. Therefore, not relevant. The media, the government, and international bodies like the UN ignore bombings because bombings don't justify banning your guns. Human rights are dangerous. That's what makes them sacred. You can misuse free speech. You can abuse due process. You can misuse firearms. But none of that means your rights disappear. And still, every time there's an urban shootout in America, foreign politicians wag their fingers, the UN condemns, the EU lectures, Democrats quote Europe as the model, but Europe has terror, knife attacks, acid attacks, mass stabbings, truck rampages. They disarmed their citizens, and now those citizens get bombed. Instead, we kept our guns, and we get blamed for their problems. Two events, same day of the year, different reactions. The London bombing, real terrorism, random victims, a potential threat to everyone who just wants to live a normal life. The Detroit shooting, a criminal gathering, preventable, localized, and exaggerated. But only Detroit became political ammunition. Only Detroit was added to the fake numbers. Only Detroit triggered new cries for control of the people because the people in charge aren't trying to stop danger, they're trying to stop you. If bombs don't count but pop-up parties do, you're being lied to.